get started. We'll have a couple stragglers, but hopefully that won't interrupt us too much. Thank you all very much for joining us. Obviously, we're going to be talking about clinical engineering and optimizing inventory for your cybersecurity needs. My name is Ben Stock. I work for ORDR. I've been with ORDR for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I spent 18 years in clinical engineering. I started out as a BMET 1 towards the end of my tenure at SSM Health. I was managing the cyber program, clinical acquisition, implementation, integrations, interoperability. So a little bit of experience in this area. I'm joined by Boyd Hutchins. Boyd Hutchins worked at Arkansas Children's, where he implemented ORDR, used it to create a program, to create policies, procedures, to help with all the topics we're going to talk about today. Boyd's had a very outstanding career in clinical engineering. Boyd, do you want to add anything to that?
Certified healthcare technology manager, certified biomedical equipment technician. Worked basically for 3 companies my whole 30-year career, and it's Aramark Service Master, right out of the military, Arkansas Children's, and now Baptist Health in Arkansas. So my bio seems kind of confused because I'm in the middle of a transition from Arkansas Children's Hospital to Baptist Health System in Arkansas.
Thank you, Boyd. So we're going to talk about specifically clinical engineering and medical equipment, but this is a process. This is a process, and these policies can also work with your facilities devices, anything within the hospital that doesn't fit the traditional IT mold that you can put an application on, that you can do an agent on, would fall into some of these categories and work with these policies that we're talking about. We're going to talk about managing legacy systems, very huge in healthcare. We cannot cycle the systems out fast enough. We can't get enough budget to replace XP, Windows 7 systems in the rate that they need to be replaced to keep up with technology. And that has to do with manufacturing. When you pick an operating system to build a device around, the manufacturer develops over that time. Operating system has a 7-year lifespan at best. Medical equipment you could be buying at the end of that lifespan and having it for 10 years afterwards. So it's a very big problem. I'm sure everyone is experiencing it. The lack of traditional IT tools helping in the medical field. We can't put Rapid7, Qualys, anything like that on these devices without the manufacturer's approval and so forth. And then we have the challenges of just day-to-day activity, of finding equipment that we need to maintain, and what we can do to help increase the ability for technicians to find equipment quickly, do their job, and not be walking around the hospital for 30, 60 minutes a day trying to find infusion pumps or portable patient monitors. Anything you'd like to add to that, Boyd?
No, you covered it. Perfect. All right, so how many of you remember a time when medical device security was not even a thing, right? Yeah, me too. I like to tell my IT friends that biomeds have been collecting and storing data on patients since before IT and hospitals ever began. And one of the things that happens is when you have advanced technology to gather and store that data, you also increase the risk that data gets lost or stolen or held for ransom or it's incorrect. Or maybe someone doesn't want your data, they just want to use your network. And I'll give you an example of something that happened at Arkansas Children's Hospital back in 2020. It was right before COVID really hit, where a company, because they run it like a business, took over our network, but they didn't want our data. They didn't want any patient information, any financial data, credit card. They just wanted our servers. They took over our servers, and they were mining Bitcoin from it. And it took 72 hours to recover from that. No ransom demand, nothing. They just routed their business through our business. And so the risk proliferates with the more data that you're collecting. Back in the day, we had networked medical devices, but they were on their own discrete networks. The likelihood of someone coming in and making a physical connection to your network was very, very low. Now everything's networked. We have plasma thawers with the PC sitting next to it that are networked. We have printers that are networked. We have pH meters that use USBs to collect data and send that to a PC. It's all over the place. It's not getting any better. We're collecting more and more data. We're storing it in server after server, and the threat is real. We've done a pretty good job, I think, as an industry, protecting those devices that are patchable. And so when Microsoft decides, hey, we don't want to support Windows 7 anymore, we can do that upgrade to Windows 10. And we have a pretty good handle on that. What we were missing was the IoT, the Internet of Things, these things that really don't fall into a PC or server category. And what we found was we didn't know what we had, we didn't know where it was, we didn't know what the configuration was, and we were manually updating our asset records. That was a huge strain on our manpower. Not only did we have to create special projects for biomed techs to walk through their areas, find their medical equipment, document what IP address, the MAC address, to get that into our CMMS, so we knew what it was, how it was connecting, and where it was connecting. We were also asking our biomed techs when they got a service call, every time you're in front of a machine, document this information. Well, biomed techs don't do that. I am one, I know. We got the stress of the service call. We want to go get it fixed and get out and go back and get our cup of coffee. We're not documenting that stuff. And so we had a real problem of knowing what medical devices held PHI. We had a real problem knowing what IP address it was using, what wireless access point it was using, and manually documenting that was taking probably at least half an FTE a year. And we were constantly falling behind because every new medical device that comes in, when you onboard that medical device, if you don't capture that data right there, you're falling behind even more. The more data we're collecting, the higher the risk, and then the response of the industry to that is kind of like what ORDR has done. They've created a tool to help us with that, and so that's what we want to talk about today.
I want to talk about one real quick thing that Boyd made me think about, and it's the fact that we've had this problem before we were connecting medical devices to the network. So it's not new to us, it's just new to what we can do to protect it. And it goes back to my first time I ever had to deal with a HIPAA incident. Woke up one morning and got an email that a laptop was stolen. I'm like, great, laptop, IT, not my problem. Well, that laptop belonged to an EMG machine at a neuro office. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's my problem. Then they say, well, that laptop wasn't actually connected. I'm like, oh, sweet, there's no data on it. No, I was wrong. They had been manually keying patients for the life of the machine. I think it was about 7 years at that time, and they had zero records on what patient records were still on that machine when it got stolen. So that turned into a complete event, OCR disclosure, because anyone that had the test, we didn't know if their information was on that device or not, so we had to notify everyone. So a device that was not connected to the network was, not necessarily considered a device with HIPAA information, even though it was, because we hadn't done the manual process of flagging it for HIPAA information, starting a process to delete patients off of it in a timely manner, cost upwards of $2 million after reporting and lawyers and all of that stuff. So we do have to be cognizant. It's not just our connected devices. It's anything that has PHI on it can be an event, and we need to be cognizant as well. We can have all the tools in the world, but they're not going to replace the boots on the ground that need to be making these decisions.
So we decided to try to tackle this problem of IoT, all these things that are accessing our network that we didn't know about. We had no clue what was using our network. Everything from the facilities maintained refrigerators with the temperature meters, the thermometers on them, are now being networked. We had no control around what devices were they using to do that. Most of them were kind of, you can buy from Home Depot kind of things. Like I said, the plasma thaw an incubator that shakes the plasma and thaws it. Used to be it was a paper towel on the counter. Now there's a PC sitting next to it, tracking all that data, linking it to a patient record for blood bank purposes. So we wanted to try to figure out what was the problem, how many devices were being connected, and then how we can monitor their behavior on the network, and if something goes wrong, get to it very quickly. We started off with our CMMS and what we thought we had, and out of 16,000 devices, we thought we had 3,000 IoT devices hooked to our network at any given time. We want to be able to detect what it is, know how it's acting on the network, and then prioritize it. Which ones do we need to worry about? Which ones do we not need to worry about? Do we really need to worry about that lab analyzer that's still running Windows 98? Are hackers really focusing on Windows 98 at this point, right? So those kinds of risk analysis. We also wanted to be able to find our devices if we needed to. Infusion pumps is a good example. We had what I call a real person tracking system. Instead of real-time location services, we had real person tracking system. We had a team of people. All they did was walk through the hospital and find stuff and clean it. We never failed to find an infusion pump. However, we did fail to find an infusion pump as fast as we needed to sometimes, right? Because we had to walk the whole hospital. We also wanted decision-making support for capital replacements and life cycle planning. Whatever system we decided to use needed to have some kind of utilization metric. How often is it used? When was it used? What studies are being performed? That kind of thing. And to be honest with you, we didn't have the best relationship with our IS security department at the time. They saw medical equipment as a risk, and we saw their security as a risk. And that's not a really good basis to have a good relationship. So we would have conversations like, a headline would come out that an infusion pump can be hacked and turned off or programming changed. IS Security is like, okay, we got to shut off all the infusion pumps off the network. And I'm like, well, you can't do that to my infusion pump. He says, I don't care about your infusion pump. I care about my network. Well, I don't care about your network. I care about my infusion pump. And so we needed to have a system that both of us could agree on and use that gave us all the information we need and had some safety guidelines or safety policies embedded in it, so we knew what to do if something went wrong, and to help build that trust with our IS security department.
All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to pop your hand up. I'll try to navigate them as best as possible, but I'll be a little interactive. I'll ask you some questions. Who has to manage their point of care inventory at the facility? Who keeps that inventory? No one? Everyone's point of care people are doing it themselves? There's an mic here. So no one's managing point of care inventory. Okay. Would you say you have a 80% accuracy on that point of care inventory? Higher than that? Are you using a tool to automatically discover them, or? Okay. It's a traditional policy. They bring them to you, you use it. I can tell you this, a majority of the hospitals that we put a tool into, and when they say they've got a good point of care inventory, it's about 50% at best. All of those devices slip through the cracks. They get on the network without you knowing about it because someone knows the SSID and the password. They need it now. They put it on the network, never come tell you that it's been inventoried. It's a big problem. Joint Commission comes in and says, show us your point of care inventory. You show it to them. They find one with a sticker that doesn't match, and everybody's having a fun day then. The next thing is Boyd talked about was physically finding things. I think that's a problem for everybody. And I'm not going to make everyone raise their hand with that particular one. What was your last topic, your last point there, Boyd?
Collaboration.
Collaboration, oh, that was the big one. Who has a great relationship with their IS department? Who has a contentious relationship with their IS department? Okay. So the great thing about a tool that brings this information together is that everybody's on an equal playing field. you have the same information IT does. You know what switch your device is connected to, you know what access point. So when you're calling up and asking for help and just saying, hey, we have a connectivity issue when the infusion pumps are in 3 North, they're not talking to properly. IS is like, that's great. What are we going to do with that? But if you can call up and say, hey, when we're on 3 North, they're actually talking to the 4 North access point and we're not getting good connectivity, it gives them something to go on and start the conversation and really bring that together so you can collaborate with the 2 departments and find the solution faster to help the patients. And that's what we're all here for, is the patients when it comes down to it. And there's no reason that we should have a contentious relationship with IT. We should be the same team working together for patient safety.
That's a good point, because it's that communication. Take an EEG machine. They used to be this big and this tall and stainless steel and ink and paper, right? Now they're a little box, and a majority of what's on there is a camera, speakers, microphone, and a PC. So when we call IS and say, hey, this EEG machine fell off the network, they're like, oh, EEG machine, that's yours. All right. But if we were to call and say, PC number such and such fell off the network, okay, that's mine. And so it was learning how to communicate between the 2 departments really helped a lot. So, okay. Okay, so here was our big surprise. Like I told you, we felt out of 16,000 devices, we had 3,000 something on the network. After we installed ORDR and it detected everything that was on the network, we had something over 250,000 devices on the network. We're like, whoa, where's that coming from, right? Now, a majority of those we found out, and this was a good thing that we could see from the dashboard here. It told us what those devices were and gave us the PC name, the MAC address, the IP address, software level, all that kind of demographic information on those devices. And what we were finding was ORDR was picking up every VDI session of every person that was using a VDI computer. Every time somebody logged in, it logged it as a new device. And we knew who logged in, we knew how long they stayed on, we knew how many times they logged in over a period of time on their shift. We could also see if that virtual desktop was logged in and left on, and whether or not our IS security policies were logging it out automatically at the time that they were supposed to. And so we really kind of were amazed that it was picking up that many devices. Another thing that we were able to find out from that was not only how many are online, but do I have any networked assets from a specific vendor? So if I wanted to make sure that that vendor's product was all patched and up to date, I could pull up Philips Patient Monitoring on ORDR and see what the software and revision levels were, bounce that off the alert to see if we were at the right level, and rest assured we were, or if not, then we could take care of it and we knew where the machine was. One of the things that the questions that we would get from IS security is what device's IP address, let's say 10.10.10.2, it's acting funny. I'm getting some noise on the network from that IP address. Heck, I don't know. We don't know IP addresses, right? In fact, this is probably DHCP. It's pulling a different IP address every time. Well, ORDR told us what that was. It was an Angel Eye camera in our NICU that's used so parents can see their babies remotely, right? It just had a bad NIC card on it, and we were able to track that down and get that replaced. Where's my GE Healthcare imaging device was another question. Hey, we have a device that's pulling this IP with this MAC address. Where is it? We need to do a patch on it. It was a portable X-ray machine. ORDR told us where it was based on what access point it was plugged into or what it was talking to. Another thing that IS Security would ask us is, We have several VPN tunnels opened up for this vendor. Here's a list of 5 or 6 of them. Gave us the IP address, but no other information on it either. And what we found out was their record keeping wasn't much better than our record keeping. And this was how we kind of built that relationship. I'll help you if you help me, right? And so ORDR was able to tell us which VPN tunnels were tied to which vendors and which devices were using that VPN tunnel for support. And then another thing that we did was to validate the accuracy of our CMMS, which assets stored PHI, because we wanted to mark that in our CMMS in case we were asked. How many are on the network all the time? How many are on the network just intermittently, whether it's an infusion pump that's turned on for the first time that day and then it's turned off. And then bounce that off our total CMMS, and we came up with a metric, number of PHI devices per entire inventory. And then as we added new devices, got the record set up straight, got it on the network, ORDR detected it, then we were able to tie our CMMS asset number to the serial number that ORDR was collecting off the network. And then that way we could match that list up to make sure it was accurate and we had everything that ORDR was capturing.
So who has VPNs that vendors use? If you're not raising your hand, you're probably lying. So who just trusts that the vendor's using it properly? You just trust it, or do you verify that the vendor's using it properly?
Who's in denial that they're using it properly? That's probably right.
Which machines they're connecting to, how much data is going back and forth, what times they're dialing into those machines to do maintenance work. So one of the great things we have, we call it the Constellation View, and it was a tool. When I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I would have loved to have had this. But it puts a little dot out on the side. It says GE support, Philips support. You click that dot, it tells you every device that GE support is dialed into. And not only does it tell you every support, it tells you what protocols they're using to talk to it. If they're using SMBv1, some unencrypted RDP protocol that they could be moving data that could contain patient data back and forth across the internet, you want to know about that. If they're moving large files across the internet, you want to know about that. But if IT's not monitoring your VPN connection for anomalies like that, you're never going to know. So having tools in place this day and age when we're so reliant on manufacturers to support their own equipment as it gets more complicated and they put blockers in place where we can't maintain it in-house, we really need those tools to understand what the vendor is doing on our piece of equipment when we can't see what they're doing.
Oh, this is a good one. This one really bailed us out. We had a software upgrade required. It was an FDA alert for one of our infusion pumps. We had over 1,400 of them in the system, in our health system. And we were, for this particular software upgrade, we were not able to upgrade them using the wireless function from their server. We had to lay hands on every pump. Of course, when the FDA issues an alert and it's a problem with the vendor, we try very hard to make the vendor pay for that. Don't use my biomeds to fix your problem, right? We all try to do that whenever we can. So we required the vendor to come on site and stay till they got every pump. After about 2 weeks, they're like, we can't find any more. So we went to ORDR and we pulled up that specific brand of infusion pump, and we saw the software version, the firmware version. We saw which access point it was accessing at the time, and we said, well, you missed 150 of our pumps. Here's the serial numbers. They are currently connected to the network. Here's the location. Go find them. And we were very successful. We didn't get all of them, but we did get, I think we were missing 25 out of 1,700 by the time we got done with that. So it was really, really powerful tool where, again, we're telling the vendor, you missed them. We know they're here because we can see them on the network.
I think this next slide is similar to that. So I'll leave that up so you can
Yeah.
look at it real quick. Boyd was talking about Baxter pumps. Who has Baxter pumps? Who's doing something about the last 4 recalls that came out for the Baxter pumps?
Who's tired of doing recalls on Baxter?
It doesn't matter. I'm not picking on Baxter. It just happens to be what Boyd has. I could ask who has Alaris pumps and who's dealing with the Alaris recalls that are 4 years old, I think, at this point in time. My point is, Baxter had 4 recalls. I believe 3 of them required physical access to the device. One of them is Baxter chose to put their wireless module inside their battery. I think it was a design feature after the fact that they wanted to add wireless to their devices, so that's where they put it. So you make this little board. It's this conglomeration of resistors and stuff, and you put it between the two, and you can read the data on that particular pump. That's great. Who's going to go into a hospital, design this thing, put it in a pump to pull the data off the pump for the last couple patients? It's never going to happen. But the 4th one was I believe it was a denial of service attack, basically, that you could do across the network. That one got my attention. All right, this is something we can do something about. And you read the alert, and at the very end of the alert, they say, we're working on it. We recommend you segment your pumps. You go to Alaris, it's the exact same thing. When they get to the end of the alert, they're like, we're working on it. You should segment your pumps and make sure they're safe. What you need to do that varies from hospital to hospital. Not everyone's using the same servers, IP addresses. Not everyone has the same network access tools to segment those off properly. You can put them on a VLAN. Most VLANs in every hospital I've seen are Swiss cheese. It's great. It's a organizational area for the pumps to go, but they can talk to everything unless it's done proper. So to do that, you really need to have an understanding of what your pumps are doing in your network in real time. And if you don't either have Wireshark them and figure that out on your own, or if you don't have a tool that's monitoring them to do that, that day comes when you need to segment those pumps and you're already behind the 8 ball. So you have to have that information, because every infusion pump is going to have a recall, and when they can't figure out how to fix it right away, they're going to tell you to protect it on your own. And if you can't do that, you're going to be up the creek.
Right. And unfortunately, the FDA says, well, if that's the manufacturer's recommendation that you protect it on your own, that's what you have to do, right? Yeah. Okay.
Talk about
how
you handle that one.
Yeah, there's another Baxter-related one that has absolutely nothing to do really with the pump itself. It was called Ripple 20. I don't know if you guys remember that. It's a problem with a chip manufacturer. Their product had a vulnerability with it, and I think this went across multiple industries. This was not just Baxter healthcare related. And it required for us to change out that battery pack, that was Baxter's solution to that, was change the battery pack at about $1,400 a piece, right? So while we were waiting on them to get their firmware upgrade done and them to come back on site and do that firmware upgrade for us, whenever we had a bad battery, we had to replace that battery at $1,400 a piece. One of the things that ORDR showed us was not only the software version, so this is a little bit different than the one I discussed previously. The software version that Baxter has, they need to install, and then a firmware upgrade or even a hardware upgrade that's got firmware in it. We needed to know which pumps had already had the new batteries installed. And so using ORDR, we pulled up that pump. We could see the firmware version. And if it was above a certain level, we knew that we had already replaced that battery. Okay, this was kind of an interesting one. Hopefully I can explain it. One of my technicians got a call, a safety tracker from the NICU. She covered the NICU, and the nurse reported that they may have over-infused a patient, a little baby in the NICU. And it looked like it was true from the safety tracker and from the patient record. However, when we looked at the utilization metrics on that pump, we could tell that pump had been infusing at the same rate for over 24 hours. and they had actually moved the patient, but didn't move the pump or clear the pump, hit the new patient on it. They got the new patient in, which was smaller than the previous patient, and just hit start on that pump because it was the same dose. But what the pump was recording was that it had infused this much when it only had infused this much. And so using the order utilization, right? So you started infusion on the first patient, they paused the pump, they didn't change the bag or anything, they got a new patient in, they did not clear that dosage from the pump, and they just hit restart, and it's, right? So the pump logged that it sent this much to that little patient, but actually only sent this much, okay? So the nurse is in a panic thinking, oh no, I may have hurt my baby, put in a safety tracker, did what she was supposed to do. We were able to put her at ease because we could see utilization metrics in order that showed that that pump had been infusing, connected to the same IP address, same access point, in that bed location for 24 hours straight. Right? It never dropped off the network, it never got a new patient. And so the utilization metrics there really helped us avoid treating a patient that we didn't need to treat because we made a mistake.
Thanks, boy. That's, you know, and I started my career in a children's hospital, so it's, I don't know if you've ever worked in a children's hospital. It is a different environment, and you're dealing with weights that are smaller, and differences in infusions are critical within children's hospitals. So that's a big hit when you're not sure exactly how much you've infused. I do want to back up. I missed a question when we were talking about the recalls and alerts and so forth. Who's familiar with the new legislation requiring that manufacturers produce SBOMs with their equipment now? Who's actually seen a manufacturer-provided SBOM? Okay, so you know this is. I don't want to diminish what's been done. It's a great thing for our industry. But if we consider we started MDS2s in 2013, and we still can't get a vendor to give us an MDS2 10 years later. I have faith we're going to get there with SBOMs, but the SBOM, if you don't, it's software bill of materials. I'm sorry if I didn't say that. Is very actually critical when we're looking at these devices. When we talked about Ripple 20 didn't affect the firmware version that Baxter installed in the device. It actually affected a subcomponent's firmware version. And you don't know that affected, not infected, sorry, until Baxter comes and tells you. If you have an SBOM, we can be much more reactive to what's going on. If we know all the little components that are within that software and there's an alert on one of those components, we don't have to wait for the manufacturer to tell us, hey, 2 weeks later, yeah, that one's going to be affected, you need to do something. We can know right away and start taking action with the tools that we've already talked about. So it's more of a statement to know, hey, these are coming, these are out there, and we need to do whatever we can to help manufacturers realize how important to us the software bill of materials is, and encourage them to produce them and give them to us, even on stuff that's older. Before we buy it, make sure they're producing that information. Yeah, absolutely.
With the SBOM, within order, are you able to correlate back to, obviously the inventory may differ by version or whatnot as we update things, but are you able to correlate the SBOM to the actual manufacturer and model?
Correct, yeah. So, and I'm going to put a caveat in there. The SBOM is only as accurate as the day it's written. So we do have some tools that actually create kind of a mini SBOM, but they tell you what third-party applications, what patches and so forth are on Windows, Linux, and Mac-based systems. But if it's just a standard standalone firmware, we really have to rely on the manufacturer's SBOM. So they're indexable. We can ingest them, and then you can say, hey, if we're looking for this particular part of the firmware, show us all devices that have this. But yeah, it's new, so they can't decide a format. Once they get down to, I think, about 3 formats, we'll probably ingest all 3, but it's just the Wild West right now, which is how anything goes when the government says, hey, do this, but doesn't put any guidelines around how you should do that. But yeah, that is the ultimate goal, is to make it completely indexable, so when something comes out, you say, find me everything with that, and you can hit the ground from day one. Any other questions real quick before I... All right, go ahead, Mike.
Just to sum up this last section with our use cases, FDA alerts, vendor software upgrade alerts, the Ripple 20 vulnerability that's published. How did we find out about all of that? Back in the day, you found out because there's a news story. Someone got attacked, or a vendor self-reveals that, or the FDA does a review and finds that there's something that needs to be corrected. We found out about all those different things from Order because they have our inventory of what's on the network. They're monitoring the industry for those alerts, and they actually send us alert within the Order system that says you have affected product. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. They are monitoring the industry for you.
And when we talk about utilization, I'll try my luck at the question to the audience again here. Who is inserted themselves into the capital acquisition process for medical equipment? Good. We should be in the middle of supply chain. Whoever's doing it, you need to be getting to the equipment before it's purchased because you have the most leverage with the vendor before you've cut a PO. They'll do some amazing things at the end of the quarter when they're waiting for a PO as far as providing documentation and getting you stuff. So we need to do that, but then we also need to understand if we're making smart acquisitions. Are we buying more infusion pumps because nurses feel they need more infusion pumps? Or you're buying an extra portable because on one day a week, they've got to wait 5 minutes to move the portable from the third floor to the fourth floor because they're busier here than there. Those kind of metrics, they're not a cybersecurity metric. They're not protecting that device, but they are part of patient care to ensure you have the right amount of equipment and the right equipment in the right place. And when we're making those decisions and helping guide capital procurement, we need to do it with data, not feelings. And we can help you provide that data based on what we've seen already happening on your network.
Yeah, so if you have two identical x-ray rooms, same age, but you only have money to replace one, we've used Order for this as well. Well, room 1 is used all the time. Here's the data. Room 2 is rarely used. Why? Because room 1 is closer to center core than room 2 is. Which one should we replace? Then you have some data to make a decision on. You can also see what studies are being run on a CT, how many of those are run, how long it's taking for them to run. So it's got quite a bit of data that you can use for utilization, decision support for the people that have the money or approve the money to be spent. So in summary, we felt like we met all of our goals that we listed before. I didn't have biomed techs running around the hospital trying to find IP addresses and locations. They were allowed to, with that free time, do the things that they were supposed to be doing. It helped us to collaborate more effectively with our IS security department. And by the time I left Arkansas Children's Hospital, we had a pretty good relationship there, and it actually, forgive the expression, got them off our back, right? When a new alert would come through or they would see something in the news, we could show them the data in order that it's protected, that we're getting alerts if we have anything with those vulnerabilities. We can tag that within Order to say, yeah, that's been fixed, and here's the data to show that we got it fixed. And a lot of that was we were helping them with their records, like for VPN tunnels or what devices are on the network and which ones are being used. We were able to tell them that. By the time I left, they were very heavy users of the Order system as well. And so that was even better. They didn't have to ask us, and we didn't have to ask them. We all had the information right there.
I think that's the end there. We left a little more time for questions than we probably planned for. I do have a general question to the audience. Are there any pain points that you're experiencing that we didn't talk about? Anything that's just glaring right now that you think could be solved with the ability to see this stuff on the network and understand what it's doing? Back there?
Is there a way to automate the alerts from Order to your CMMS so you can document that you actually took care of it? I mean, seeing it is phenomenal.
So you're talking about maybe like an API where you get an alert in order, it opens a work order in your CMMS.
Yeah. So I'm going to say there is if. If you have the correct systems and we've built the integration, it's 100% possible. Nuvolo, ServiceNow-based CMMSs, we're working with Accruent, EQ2, all of them to get to that ideal spot. Because honestly, if you have a good enough integration with your CMMS and Order, or a tool like Order, you should really never have to be in the tool, unless you're looking for something very specific. We should be able to share the information, what access point it's located to, real time to your CMMS. So you go on your CMS, pull the thing up because you're looking for it, and the location is its order location or access point location is updated every 15 minutes, realistically. Things like alerts that come in should, if you're dealing with Nuvolo, I don't know what you have, but Nuvolo has a way to take in our alerts, take in alerts from other systems, and say, okay, these are the same. We're only opening one work order for this. So if you have an advanced CMMS solution, you can do a lot more than if you have an older version of AIMS or something along those lines. But ideally, yes, you would get an alert in Order. It would open a work order in your CMMS, manage the entire thing through there. When you close it, all that information is shared back to Order. It's closed, so no matter which system you go to, you have the same amount of information and the same information about it. And you're not double working the issue. Yeah.
Sorry, with the location access points,
Yeah.
do you have to have the inventory of locations of where they are, or is it just access point 101?
So that really depends on how good your networking team is. So we're going to do what we call SNMP polling of those devices, and there's a location field on those devices. So if they put in unknown, it's going to show unknown. We have workarounds for that. If you're using something like Cisco Spaces, DNA Center, Prime, or I'm thinking of the Aruba version of that, and they've put that in there, we can pull it from that system and give you that location. And then we can also, if your IT department has just a list of names with locations next to them, you can just program those in with like real text, like this is 3 North, 2nd hallway, or something like that. So we bring as much information as we can to tell you that location in normal text that normal people can understand as opposed to IT speak. So it really depends on your situation, but you can do lots of things so that you know exactly where that is based on logic and not just numbers that are associated with an access point.
Of AP names, you just import them in.
Correct, yeah.
And that's another field in the.
Yeah, and right now it's broken down by region location. Eventually it's going to be region location, building, floor, which is how the Ciscos of the world kind of look at stuff.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. And then just follow on. So if we had bad location, bad networking, and we see that, oh, there's a lot of unknowns, and then have actually make the effort of seeing, hey, there's benefit to having better location. Can we update it?
Yeah, you can manually put it in, and we're going to associate that location with that access point internally within Order. Or you can say, hey, network services, let's figure it out, let's label these, and then next time we pull that device, we're going to pull that network location down.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yes? Mayo, pretty big. Cleveland Clinic, pretty big. It does take a team. A CMMS like Nuvolo is amazing and your worst enemy all in one thing, because you have the ability to do so much and you want to do so much, but you necessarily don't have the time or the resources to do everything that's available to you unless you're the Mayos of the world who have a large staff. So you really have to pick and choose what you focus on, get it figured out, and then move down instead of trying to take it all on at once. I kind of went along on that question, but yes, we do have people doing that. I'm not familiar with that one. Is that the main manufacturer? Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. I apologize. So we build integrations based on our customer base. So if you would purchase our product, and when you're purchasing, you say, hey, this is a requirement, we talk to the manufacturer, set up a timeline, roadmap it, and get it done. We have our API is very robust. It's open, and they can call any information from Order. That's easy to get it into the CMMS. Getting the information from the CMS back and then doing the bidirectional work orders, that gets a little more complicated as far as the integrations go. Yes, sir. Is the security side. We are not just an asset inventory tool, we are a security tool. So we didn't really get in deep into it, but we're monitoring all the flows that are going between the devices, what that device is talking to, who's talking to it, down to how much data is going back and forth, what protocol is being used, what port's being used. But not only are we monitoring it, we're watching it, we're running it through a full IDS engine. So we're running it through those vulnerability engines that are looking for patterns, and we're going to flag any flow that has a thing. And as far as I know, we're the only one in the industry that's doing that real time. So the security side of our product is where we would differ than all the rest of us.
And I will say, when we first evaluated products, that was our sole purpose, was the security piece. It was picking up our own IS security department's port scans of our devices and flagging it and saying something's scanning your device. At first, they didn't like that we were calling them and saying, why is this IP address scanning our device? Because they'd have to say, well, that's us, right? But that kind of built that trust with them. And that was really the sole purpose for Order when we selected them as our product, was the security piece, because it was so strong. We just happened to see all the data and think, hey, we can use this for so much more.
Yeah, and to Boyd's point is, IT doesn't know they're doing anything wrong most of the time. They'll just scan a whole VLAN and go to town, and you'll get a call that, hey, my infusion pump did something weird, and then you get the third or fourth call that it did something weird, and then you start thinking, hey, there's something going on here. So being able to identify those, so I mean that's another whole section we didn't get into, is we integrate with Rapid7 Qualys and stuff like that. So we can tell them, hey, even this VLAN's our medical VLAN, but we've got 30 medical workstations that are perfectly safe to scan. Well, instead of just excluding the whole VLAN, just scan these 30, or anything else that Order finds that is, we call safe to scan it. So we can take those scans and really start targeting systems as opposed to just secluding whole VLANs.
And so with our IS security department scanning that VLAN, they seem to always be hitting the lab equipment for some reason. So we think they were scanning the whole VLAN. We were able to actually filter out their scanners, their Rapid7 servers IP address, so it would not throw an alert once we detected what that was. So we really were able to optimize what was being detected and what was being alerted.
So, on the topic of VLANs, are you able to scan the VLAN itself altogether?
So we're passive, 100% passive. Well, out of the box, we're 100% passive. So we're not scanning anything. So we're just passively learning the traffic as it goes by. So we're not reaching out to any devices. We're not trying things. We're not trying credentials. We're not trying any of that stuff like you would with a Rapid7 or a Tenable. So that's the key thing, is because the IoT devices, medical devices, are so sensitive to those types of scans, we don't want to do that. But we do want to give you the ability to say, okay, these devices, we've tested them, we know they work, so we can scan them from now on. But we don't want to have to sit there and hand key the IP addresses if we want to scan these devices, or they may be DHCP. Infusion pumps are moving to DHCP. Vital signs monitors are moving to DHCP to get their IP addresses, where we used to work in just static IP all the time. So now you can't even give the IP. You can give a MAC or something like that, but you can't tell IT what the IP of that device is going to be 100% of the time. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yes, it does. Also, wanted to ask you about modules. You talked about Baxter infusion pumps.
Yeah.
Do I need to purchase my module for Alaris infusion pumps? Is it vendor agnostic, or how does that work?
We don't have packages. So we have 3 criteria that go from C, no to secure, and you get, see everything in the first one, know all what it's doing in the second one, and then secure your segmentation in the last one. But we're not going to say, oh, you've got this CMMS, you've got to buy this package to integrate with this CMMS. It's just not a game we play. Sorry, get salesy. That's about as salesy as I will get on this particular point.
Last question. Are you able to push updates or anything?
We do not. So 100% passive, like I said before. We do not want to get into that game. If you find somebody that can do that, they're going to make a ton of money, but it's also a ton of risk. So I would avoid that.
Thank you.
We have not I guess a little bit in the medical side. So we do capture the certs. We capture when they're issued, when they're going to expire, and we can set alerts based on that. It really depends on how we're positioned in your network and how your certs are set up. If you've manually gone in and put a cert on a device, we're not going to know about it. Yes, sir. So, Philips and GE, both of them, they've got different configurations. The kind of older proprietary ones, and now they're moving to being on hospital networks. On the hospital network, we will see your Philips devices. We can pull, model information, usually firmware. They're pretty chatty on HL7. They give us a lot of information. If it's on the Philips or GE proprietary network, we actually need to put a sensor within that network or a line within that network to get that data. Wonderful. Anything else, Boyd? Any closing?
One of the questions I get asked is, what criteria did we use to select a product? And regardless of which product you end up selecting, we found out that the proof of concept was number one. We had some trouble with our IS security department in that they worked really hard to get proof of concept set up, where a vendor would send in their product, get it on the network, and we would just check it out and see if it worked. But they didn't take that proof of concept into consideration in the evaluation. You understand what I'm saying? If a vendor wants to do a proof of concept on your network and they can't get it done, or you have to spend money, or something stops working, you probably don't want them in real life, right? And so we wanted to make sure that the proof of concept was contained within the evaluation. And so one of the things that we evaluated our vendors on was how smoothly did the proof of concept setup work, and did it stop anything on our network from working. We did have a vendor that we lost all VoIP traffic when they turned their system on. And so, that's bad. Let's move on down the road. We also wanted something that our IS security department and HTM could agree on and to use. So that was another big criteria. We also wanted to see what data they could pull. And as Ben said, was it active or passive? The last thing that we wanted as an HTM department was one more product scanning our medical equipment, because our IS security department's doing it all the time. And so those were the four big components to our evaluation there.
Well, thank you everyone very much. One last chance. Once, twice, sold. All right, everyone have a great rest of your day.
All right, thanks.